My name is Renata Voss. I'm 34 years old. I live in a gray stone townhouse in the Capitol Hill neighborhood of Denver, Colorado. Last month, on a Tuesday evening in March, to be exact, my father knocked on my front door for the first time in 11 years. I was in the kitchen. Marcus was at the stove, stirring something that smelled like garlic and olive oil. Our dog, a 3-year-old beagle named Biscuit, was doing his usual evening sprint between the kitchen and the living room, burning off whatever energy a beagle decides he has at 7 p.m. It was ordinary. It was genuinely, beautifully ordinary. And then the knock came. I didn't know it was him at first. Through the peephole, all I could see was an older man in a gray jacket, shoulders slightly rounded, standing on my front step with a paper coffee cup held in both hands like he was waiting for a bus. He was looking down, tilted his face upward just slightly, and I saw it. The jaw, the slight hook in the nose, my jaw, Gerald Voss, my father, stood at that door for what felt like a very long time. The garlic smell drifted in from the kitchen. Biscuit barked twice and then went quiet, like even he understood that something was happening that was bigger than his involvement. I want to tell you the whole story, because the whole story is the only thing that makes that moment make sense. And the story doesn't start in Denver, and it doesn't start in March. It starts in a beige colonial house on Whitmore Street in Hartford, Connecticut, the summer of 1999, when I was 9 years old and my father was still someone I believed in completely. Before I get into this, please like this video and subscribe. But only if this story truly resonates with you. Only if some part of it lands somewhere real. And drop your location and local time in the comments right now. I want to know who's out there with tonight. My parents married young. My mother, Diane Hargrove, she went back to her maiden name the same week the divorce was final, was 23 when she married my father. Gerald was 24. They met at a church picnic in West Hartford, which I have always found both the most wholesome and most ironic origin story possible, because there was nothing wholesome about how it ended. For the first 9 years of my life, things were fine, not warm. My father was not a warm man. He was reliable, functional, the kind of man who showed up to parent-teacher conferences and little league games and church on most Sundays, but always with a slight air of obligation, like he was moving through a checklist someone else had written for him. He worked as a regional sales manager at Whitmore Office Solutions, a mid-sized office supply company headquartered in downtown Hartford. He wore the same 4 blazers in rotation. He drove a silver Honda Accord. He read the newspaper at the breakfast table while my mother and I talked. My mother was the one who made our house feel like a home. She was an administrative coordinator at Hartford Hospital. She had this gift for arriving home at 5:45 in the afternoon and having the table set and something warm on the stove by 6:15. She sang off-key to the radio when she thought no one was listening. She knew the name of every one of my teachers and most of my classmates. She came to every school play, every science fair, every everything, not because anyone told her to, but because it genuinely never occurred to her to be anywhere else. I was their only child, and I think that, for my father, was part of the problem. I don't think he ever entirely wanted just one. I don't think he ever entirely wanted me. He never said that. People like my father don't say the quiet parts out loud. But I felt it the way children feel things, not as a thought but as a temperature in the room. The way his attention drifted during conversations. The way his voice took on a different quality, lighter, more animated, when he talked about his co-worker Phil's 3 boys. The way he never quite had that ease with me. My parents separated in the spring of 1999 when I was 9 years old. I came home from school on a Wednesday in April to find my mother sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of water and red eyes, and my father's coat missing from the hook by the front door. The divorce was final by February of the following year. My mother got the house on Whitmore Street. My father got an apartment on Farmington Avenue and every other weekend with me. He also got, within 8 months of moving out, a woman named Cheryl Dunmore. I met Cheryl for the first time on a Saturday in October 2000. I was 10. She was 38. She had highlighted blonde hair and a laugh that was slightly too loud for enclosed spaces, and she had 2 kids from a previous marriage, Tyler, 6, and Kayla, who was 3. We went to Applebee's in West Hartford. My father sat next to Cheryl, and across from me, he spent most of the meal leaning toward her, laughing at things she said, cutting Tyler's chicken fingers without being asked. I ate my grilled sandwich and watched and said very little, which was a skill I had been quietly developing for most of my life. They were married 14 months later. I was at the ceremony because I was technically invited. I spent most of it standing near the dessert table with a Sprite, watching my father dance with Cheryl while Tyler and Kayla ran between the adults, legs being called adorable by everyone in the room. A woman I didn't know crouched down to Kayla's level and said, "Aren't you the most beautiful flower girl?" And Kayla beamed and Cheryl glowed, and my father put his hand on Cheryl's back, and I ate another petit, 4, and looked at the exits. They moved into Cheryl's house in Glastonbury, a suburb east of Hartford. Nicer than anything we'd had growing up on Whitmore Street. 3 bedrooms, a yard with a deck, a basketball hoop in Tyler's driveway. Kayla had a room painted lavender with white trim, with her name stenciled above the doorframe in curling script. I had a pull-out couch in the home office Cheryl used for her pampered chef business. The first year, I still had every other weekend. By the second year, it had slipped to once a month, usually a Saturday afternoon that ended by dinner, because Tyler had a birthday party, or Kayla had, ballet, or there was always a thing. By the time I was 13, I had figured out the architecture of my father's new life, and I understood, with a clarity I did not yet have languaged for, that I was not load-bearing in it. Tyler and Kayla called him Dad. He coached Tyler's Little League team in the summer of 2002. He drove Kayla to her recitals. He built a treehouse in the Glastonbury backyard in the summer of 2003. My mother and I drove past it once by accident when we got turned around looking for a hardware store. I saw it through the car window. The wooden platform, the rope ladder, Tyler's red sneakers sticking out of the opening. And I didn't say anything, and my mother didn't say anything. She made the turn onto the main road and turned up the radio, and the treehouse disappeared behind us. I understood by then that grief has a texture. That one felt like wet concrete. I want to pause here for a moment because I know some of you feel this. Has a parent ever made you feel like a visitor in a home that was supposed to be yours too? Like there was a family happening somewhere in your orbit that you hadn't been cast in? Leave that in the comments. I want to know I'm not the only one who has ever stood outside a treehouse and kept driving. My mother kept us afloat on a Hartford hospital administrator's salary and a child support check. My father paid reliably but without anything extra. Attached to it, no birthday surprises. No, I was thinking of you. She refinanced the house twice. She picked up part-time tutoring on Thursday evenings so I could do the 2-week summer program at the Hartford Academy of Arts the year I was 14. She never complained about any of it. She just did it. With the same quiet ferocity she applied to everything, and I didn't fully understand until I was an adult what that cost her. I graduated from Hall High School in Hartford in June of 2009. My mother was in the 3rd row in a yellow dress. My grandmother, Nana Rose, wore a hat with a silk flower that she'd bought specifically for the occasion. My Aunt Patricia drove up from New Haven. The bleachers were full, and it was a warm June morning, and when I walked across that stage, I heard my mother from the 3rd row, not screaming. Just this single sustained yes, and I felt it in my chest. My father was not there. He sent his regrets a week before. Tyler had his end-of-season baseball tournament that same weekend in Waterbury. It had been scheduled for months. He was very sorry. He mailed me a card. There was $50 inside. I kept the $50. I threw away the card. I enrolled at Colorado State University in Fort Collins that August on a partial academic scholarship, a federal Pell Grant, and a $6, 200 student loan. My mother helped me pack the 2003 Honda Civic she'd co-signed for standing in the driveway on Whitmore Street at 6 in the morning, with her coffee in one hand and a grocery bag of things she'd assembled for me. Granola bars, a first aid kit, a small framed photo of the two of us from a trip we'd taken to Mystic Seaport when I was 11. She held my face in her hands at the end and she said, "You are going to be absolutely fine." She said it the way people say things they have decided are true. I called her from a rest stop in Ohio, crying so hard I could barely form words. She talked me through it for 45 minutes. She was late to work. She never mentioned it. College was the first place I had ever felt like myself. I was studying civil engineering because I liked the clarity of it. The way a bridge either holds or it doesn't. The way load calculations don't have feelings. The way the math is the same regardless of whether you're having a good day. Freshman roommate was a woman named Simone Abernathy from Colorado Springs, loud, precise, the kind of person who laughs with her whole body and also remembers everything you've ever told her. By October, we were eating every meal together and staying up until 2 a.m., arguing about things that mattered to us. Simone is still my closest friend. She is the person I call when I cannot tell anyone else. My father called me, in my 4 years at CSU, a total of 11 times. I counted later by going through my old phone records. 11 calls in 4 years, most of them short. "How are classes? Are you eating?" "Great, glad to hear it." One of them, junior year, was to tell me that Tyler had gotten into UConn on a baseball scholarship, and that he and Cheryl were absolutely thrilled. Said congratulations, I meant it. He did not ask about my grades. My GPA that semester was 3.74. I had been accepted into a competitive summer internship with the Colorado Department of Transportation. I had just been told by my advisor, Dr. Nadia Reyes, that I had real aptitude for structural analysis. I did not volunteer any of this, and he did not ask. My graduation from Colorado State was May 11th, 2013. My mother flew out on a Thursday. Simone's parents, her father Carl and her mother Renee, who had been quietly adopting me as a third daughter over 4 years of holiday dinners and summer visits, stood with my mother in the bleachers at Moby Arena and whooped embarrassingly loud when I crossed the stage. My mother cried. I cried. We went to the Rio Grande afterward and drank margaritas at 1 p.m. on a Saturday, and Simone's father gave a toast that went on too long, and I didn't want it to end. My father was not there. He was at Kayla's high school graduation in Glastonbury the same weekend. He texted me at 11:14 a.m. as I was lining up with my cohort. "Thinking of you today, Renata. So proud. Sorry couldn't make it. Kayla's graduation conflicted, you understand." I did not text back. "I want to ask you something, because some of you know exactly what I mean when I say this. You know the specific weight of a missed milestone, a graduation, a game, a recital, a wedding, something you needed a person to show up for, and they didn't. What was it? What did they choose instead? Drop it in the comments. You don't have to give details. Just tell me what they missed." I moved to Denver in July of 2013 with $2,300 in savings and a job offer from a civil engineering firm called Vantage Engineering Group. Starting salary $52,000 a year. I rented a one-bedroom apartment in the uptown neighborhood for $875 a month, and I ate a lot of pasta and I worked 12-hour days, and I was genuinely the happiest I had been in a long time. I called my mother every Sunday. I called my father on major holidays. For the first 2 years, out of some vestigial sense of obligation I hadn't fully examined yet. Those conversations were always the same. "How's Denver? Cold? How's work? Good. Say hi to Cheryl, will do." By Thanksgiving of 2015, I had quietly stopped calling. He didn't call either. Neither of us acknowledged the silence. It was, in its way, the most honest thing we had ever done. My mother was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer in January of 2016. She called me on a Sunday morning and told me with a steadiness in her voice that I now understand was performance. She'd had 3 days to compose herself before she dialed my number, and she'd decided exactly what she was going to say and how she was going to say it. I booked a flight to Hartford for the following weekend, and I sat at the kitchen table in the house on Whitmore Street and held her hand while she walked me through the oncologist's report. She was starting chemotherapy at Hartford Hospital, where she had worked for 26 years, which she noted with a very faint smile. At least I know where the good parking is. I called my father that evening from my rental car, sitting in the driveway with the engine running. I told him about the diagnosis, about the chemo schedule starting in February. He was quiet for a moment and then he said, "I'm really sorry to hear that, Renata. How's she holding up?" I said she was holding up. He said, "If there's anything I can do." I said, "There isn't." He said, "Okay. Well, tell her," I said. "Tell her I'm thinking of her." I said I would. Didn't. My mother went through 6 months of chemotherapy at Hartford Hospital. I flew back to Hartford 7 times that year, using every day of P2 I had accumulated and then some. I got a verbal warning from my manager at Vantage, a man named Phil Duarte, for missing a project deadline when I was in Hartford during my mother's worst reaction to the 3rd round of treatment. Sat in his office and I nodded and I apologized and I drove home and I cried for 20 minutes in a Target parking lot, and then I went back inside, finished the report that night. My father visited my mother once during her treatment. Once. He drove to Hartford for an afternoon in April and took her to lunch at a diner near the hospital. He told me about it on the phone like it was a significant act of courage. He'd had to move some things around, he said. Cheryl had been a little unsure about it, he said, but she understood in the end. I remember sitting very still when he said that. Cheryl had been a little unsure. My mother was his daughter's mother. She was sitting in a chemotherapy chair every 3 weeks. Cheryl Dunmore. Cheryl, with her lavender rooms and her pampered chef catalogs and her children who called my father Dad, had been a little sure about whether he should take a sick woman to lunch, I said. "I have to go, Dad." I hung up before he could answer. My mother's final scan in November of 2016 showed clear margins. She was declared in remission by December. Sat in my apartment in Denver, and I wept. The ugly kind. The kind that sounds terrible and clears out every single thing you've been holding. And then I washed my face and called her, and she answered on the second ring and said, "I told you I'd be fine." She had. She had told me that from the beginning. My father sent her a card. The thing about being made invisible by a parent, the thing that's hardest to explain to people who haven't lived it, is that it's not usually one dramatic event. It's 100 quiet ones. It's the Father's Day call he doesn't return for 3 days. It's the email I sent him in March of 2018 with a photo of a pedestrian bridge I'd designed over Cherry Creek in Denver. 8 months of my life. The first major project I'd led from start to finish, and the response that came 4 days later. "Looks great," Cheryl says hi. It's the Christmas of 2019 when Kayla answered the phone and I could hear them all in the background, Tyler laughing, a football game on the TV, the sound of a full and warm house, and Kayla said, "Oh, hold on," and called for my father. There was a pause long enough that I knew he'd hesitated before picking up. Those pauses, that is what does it. Stopped calling entirely after that Christmas. I was 29 years old, and I had spent 18 years being a footnote in his life. I was tired. Not dramatically tired, just the steady, accumulating exhaustion of a woman who has finally accepted what is true and is done, pretending otherwise. I wrote him a letter in January of 2020. Not angry. Not a list of grievances, not a verdict. I told him that I was stepping back. That I wasn't going to keep reaching for a relationship that only moved in one direction. That I wished him well and I meant it. I told him he could contact me if he ever wanted to. I would decide at that point whether I had the capacity for it. He did not respond. I need you to understand what came after. Because people always want to skip to the end, and the end doesn't mean anything without the middle. I was 30 years old in 2020, living through a pandemic in a 1-bedroom apartment in Denver, and I was, somehow, unexpectedly, genuinely, the most grounded I had ever been. Had been promoted at Vantage Engineering Group the year before to senior structural engineer. My salary was $97,000. I had $23 0 in a Roth IRA, and 4 months of living expenses in a savings account that I had built from scratch, from nothing, from pasta and silence years, from 12-hour days and verbal warnings and crying in parking lots. I was quiet, privately proud of every dollar in it. I started therapy in February of 2020 with a woman named Dr. Patricia Huang, whose office was on Sherman Street in Capitol Hill. Small room, good light, a very tiny cactus on the windowsill that I found oddly reassuring. Huang had a way of asking questions that felt less like inquiry and more like a key turning in a lock. She didn't tell me my father was a bad person. She asked me what I needed from a relationship with him and whether I believed I could get it. She asked me what it would mean for me if I never did. We sat with those questions for months. I cried in her office more than I have ever cried anywhere, and I have cried in a fair number of places. I met Marcus Webb at a birthday party for Simone's boyfriend in October of 2020. He was a history teacher at East High School in Denver, tall, quiet in the specific way that means he's paying attention rather than absent, the kind of person who listened like he was genuinely waiting to hear what you said rather than what he expected. We talked for 2 hours at that party about infrastructure and the New Deal and a book we had both read. He texted me the next day. By February 2021, I had given him a key to my apartment, which was not something I did without deliberation. Marcus knew about my father from the beginning, told him early, because I didn't want to build something with a structural crack hidden underneath it. He listened all the way through. Then he said, "I'm really sorry that happened to you," and he didn't follow it with anything else. He just let it be what it was, which was exactly right. My mother came to Denver for Thanksgiving of 2021. Her first flight since the cancer treatment. Marcus made a full turkey with cornbread stuffing and sweet potato pie. My mother sat at the kitchen table in my apartment and looked around at my bookshelves and my framed engineering drawings on the wall and the photos on the shelves, and she said quietly, like she was stating a fact, "You built a beautiful life." I want to stop here because I know some of you are in this part right now, the middle, the rebuilding. The years where you're doing the work, and no one in your family of origin is watching, and maybe part of you still wants someone to see it. Tell me, what is one thing you have built for yourself that the people who doubted you don't know about yet? Leave it in the comments. I want to know. I want to celebrate it with you. By 2023, I had been promoted again at Vantage. Lead project engineer, $118,000 a year, leading a team of 6 on a municipal infrastructure project for Denver Public Works. A $4.2 million bridge retrofit over the South Platte River. I had been nominated for an internal recognition award that I won. A firm in Boulder had reached out about a senior position after hearing about the Cherry Creek pedestrian bridge from someone on the city council. I was not thinking about my father, or rather, I had thought about him so much and for so long and with such sustained effort that I had finally arrived at a place where the thoughts were quiet. Dr. Huang calls it integration. I called it Tuesday. On a Thursday afternoon in March of this year, I was at my desk at Vantage reviewing stress load calculations for a retaining wall project in Aurora when my phone buzzed with an unknown number, carrying a Hartford area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. I almost set it face down on my desk and moved on, but something, some old trained in reflex that I have not entirely been able to dismantle, made me pick it up. Renata, his voice, quieter than I remembered. Something had gone out of it, some quality I couldn't immediately name. I sat very still. "Dad, I'm in Denver," he said. "I flew in this morning. I was wondering if I could come see you. I understand completely if you don't want to. I needed to try." I didn't say anything for a moment. Through my office window, the Front Range was sharp and snow-capped against a cloudless blue sky, the way it gets in March when the light is strong. The air is still cold. I thought. He flew to Denver. He bought a plane ticket, booked a flight, came. He made the effort. And then I thought, he had 11 years to make this effort. I said, "Give me your hotel. I'll text you after 6. He gave me the name, the Warwick on Spear Boulevard, which is 6 blocks from my house. I wrote it down on the corner of my legal pad. I hung up, sat with my hand on the phone for another 30 seconds looking at the Front Range. Then, I went back to the load calculations. I called Simone on my lunch break from the parking lot. I left a message for Dr. Huang. Then I called Marcus, who picked up on the second ring, told him, and he said, "What do you need from me?" I said, "I don't know yet." He said, "Okay, I'll make dinner." I texted my father at 6:15. "Come by at 7. I'll send you the address." He knocked at 7 too. I know because I was watching the clock on the kitchen wall. I had been standing with Marcus, not cooking, just standing, and when the knock came, I walked to the door and looked through the peephole, and there he was, the gray jacket, the paper coffee cup gone cold in both hands, my nose, my jaw, opened the door. He looked older, thinner than I remembered. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there the last time I'd seen him. His shoulders didn't carry themselves the same way. He looked like a man who had been carrying something heavy for a good long while and had finally gotten tired of pretending it wasn't heavy. He said, "Renata." I said, "Hi, Dad, come in." Marcus made tea without being asked. He set 2 mugs on the coffee table, nodded quietly at my father, and excused himself down the hall. That's the thing about Marcus. He knows when a room needs to be smaller. My father sat on the couch. I sat in the armchair across from him. Biscuit sniffed at his shoe briefly and then wandered away, apparently unimpressed. And then my father talked. Cheryl had left him. Not last month, not in a scene. 2 years earlier, in January of 2022, after a period of growing distance that my father described haltingly, circling the words like he wasn't quite ready to land on any of them. She had met someone, he said, a man from her church. They had handled it quietly, for Tyler and Kayla's sake. He hadn't told many people. Tyler was in Boston now, working at a financial services firm. He called on Sundays, dutifully. Kayla was in Charlotte with her husband and a 2-year-old daughter. My father's first grandchild, though that word sat strangely in the air of my living room, like a word from a foreign language I'd never been invited to learn. He saw Kayla a few times a year. He was living alone in a condo in West Hartford. He had retired from Whitmore Office Solutions in 2021 during a round of layoffs with a package he described as reasonable. He had more time now than he knew what to do with. He said, "I've been doing a lot of thinking. About everything. About—" He stopped. He looked at the tea. "About you." He said it carefully like the word had weight. "About all the things I didn't do." The room was very still. Outside, a car passed on the street. Inside, the clock on the wall ticked. "I didn't come to your graduation," he said. "Either of them. I didn't come when your mother was sick. I kept waiting for a better time. I kept telling myself there would be a better time, and there never was. Then you sent that letter and I read it and I just—" He exhaled through his nose. "I put it in a drawer. I told myself I'd respond when I found the right words. I never found them." He looked up at me then, 62 years old, tired, present in a way he had rarely been present in the whole course of my life. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said. "I think I've earned that. I just needed to say it to your face. I missed your life. I made choices and I missed your life and I am sorry." I did not cry. I had thought I would. I'd imagined some version of this conversation for a decade, and in every version I'd ever constructed, cried. But sitting there in my living room, in the house I'd made, with the Front Range outside the window and Marcus down the hall and a coffee table from a Saturday flea market in Rhino and framed photos of people who had chosen me on every wall, I didn't cry. I felt something else. I felt clear. I said, "I believe you're sorry, Dad." "I do." He looked up. "But I need you to understand what sorry covers and what it doesn't. It doesn't change the graduation. It doesn't change Mom's chemo. It doesn't change Tyler's baseball tournament or the pull-out couch in the Pampered chef office. It doesn't change the Cherry Creek Bridge email." I kept my voice level. Years of Dr. Huang had given me practice. "I'm not saying that to punish you. I'm saying it because if we're going to have any kind of honest conversation, it has to include what actually happened. not a version of it with the edges sanded down. He nodded. He didn't try to qualify anything, I said. I have a good life. I want you to know that clearly. I have a partner who is a genuinely good man. I have a career I'm proud of. I have friends who are family. I have a relationship with my mother that is one of the best things I have ever had. I built all of that without you. Not to spite you, just because I had to. And it doesn't have a hole in it shaped like you. I need you to know that. He was quiet for a long time, then quietly, "How is she? Your mom?" 8 years in remission, I said. "She's healthy. She's well." Something moved across his face. Relief, I think. Or something older and harder to name. The particular look of a person who has been bracing against a piece of information for a long time. He stayed for about an hour and a half. He asked about my work, not the way he used to, with that thin, performative interest that never led anywhere, but specifically. He asked about the South Platte River project. He asked how I had ended up in structural engineering. He asked about Marcus, and I told him, and he said, "He sounds like a good man," and I said, "He is," and I meant it the way I have meant very few things. Near the end, he asked if he could come back. Not to make up for the lost years, not to reclaim something, just whether he could. Whether the door was open at all. I thought about it, honestly. I thought about what Dr. Huang had been asking me for 5 years. What I needed, and whether I believed I could get it. I thought that I was 34 years old, and my father was 62. And neither of us had infinite time. The version of me who had needed him desperately, who had pressed her face to a car window watching a treehouse, who had held a graduation card with $50 inside and thrown it in the recycling bin. That woman didn't live here anymore, but there was a version of me who could, carefully, with clear eyes, extend something small and see what it became. I said, "I'm not ready to promise you anything, but I'm not closing the door either." He nodded. He stood, put the gray jacket back on, and picked up the paper coffee cup that had gone cold on my coffee table. At the door, he paused. He looked at the framed photos on the wall by the entrance. Me and Simone at a trail race in Red Rocks. Me and Marcus in the kitchen mid-law. Me and my mother at Thanksgiving, squinting into the Colorado sun, her arm tight around my shoulders. He looked at them for a long moment. He said, "I'm glad you have this." I said, "I know." He walked down the front steps. I watched him go. I closed the door. Marcus came out from the hall 30 seconds later. He didn't say anything. He just sat down on the couch and opened his arm, and I sat next to him. And Biscuit climbed onto my feet, and we stayed like that for a while, listening to the street. "How do you feel?" he asked eventually. I thought about it honestly. "Not broken," I said. "Not fixed either, just clear." He kissed the top of my head. I have thought about that conversation a lot in the weeks since. About the man who sat on my couch, older, quieter, diminished in the ways life eventually diminishes everyone, and said the words I had waited 20 years to hear. I've thought about whether those words change anything. The honest answer is, a little. They change a little. They don't change the graduation at Moby Arena, my mother in the third row in her yellow dress, and my father at a baseball tournament in Waterbury. They don't change the 7 flights to Hartford, and the verbal warning from Phil Duarte, and the 20 minutes in a Target parking lot. They don't change the pull-out couch, or the treehouse, or the $50 in the card, or the email about the Cherry Creek Bridge that got a response about Cheryl saying hi. But they change something about how I carry it. For a long time I carried it as an open wound, the kind that reopens if you press on it wrong, that you learn to move around rather than through. I think what it is now is scar tissue, permanent, present but not bleeding, not anymore. I called my mother the morning after and told her. She was quiet for a moment, and then she asked, "How do you feel about it?" The exact same question Marcus had asked, which maybe says something about the people I have been lucky enough to collect. Clear. Not fixed. Clear, she said. "That's enough, baby. Clear is enough." I see Dr. Huang every other Thursday. The Boulder firm is still interested, and I think I'm going to take the meeting in April. Marcus and I are looking at houses. Our lease is up in July, and we've already been to 3 open houses. which Simone finds both hilarious and unsurprising because she told me 2 years ago we should buy. She was right, she usually is. Father texted me last week. Just a photo. Bushnell Park in Hartford in the early spring, the pond and the old carousel in the background, the kind of pale morning light that Hartford gets in March when the sky is still deciding. He sent it with 2 sentences. Made me think of you. Hope you're well. I looked at it for a long time. Then I typed back, it's beautiful, I'm well, I sent it. I don't know what comes next. I don't know if he comes back to Denver, or if we find something that looks like a relationship, or if this is the beginning of something, or the quiet, civil conclusion of something that was never fully alive to begin with. I don't know if I will ever fully forgive him, or if forgiveness is even the right word for what I am working toward. Doctor. Huang says forgiveness isn't something you do all at once. She says it's more like a door you decide to keep partially open, not because the other person has earned it, but because you deserve the fresh air. I think she's right. I think I deserve the fresh air. What I know is this. I am 34 years old. I have a $118,000 salary and a bridge retrofit over the South Platte River, and a man who makes garlic olive oil pasta on Tuesday nights and knows exactly when to step out of a room. I have a dog who barked twice and went quiet, and a best friend who was right about the house. I have a mother who has been in remission for 8 years and who says, clear is enough, like it's a benediction. I built this. From a pull-out couch and a $50 card and a car window and a treehouse I was never invited to climb. The woman who built it does not need anyone's approval. She never did. Here's what I want to leave you with. The person who hurt you, really hurt you, over years in the slow accumulating way that doesn't leave one big mark, but 100 small ones. If person showed up at your door one day and said they were sorry, would you open it? No wrong answers. Yes, no, or it depends. Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you see yourself anywhere in this story, the missed graduation, the years of building in the dark, the moment of standing at the door deciding, I want to know. Leave a comment. If you want more stories like this, check the description.